Caller 53106 if you want to make any points. We have Irish Olympian Gary O'Toole here in studio and Sinead O'Carroll, news editor at the Journal. So we're streaming as well as usual on the Sunday papers, so you're on screen, Gary. Sit up straight. The back page is then Sun Sport have the FA Cup final yesterday. Eugen Conte on me, Chelsea boss, says I'm a serial winner. The front page of The Observer has Celtic, treble hoops, Celtic march into history as McGregor seals a double treble for Celtic, unprecedented dominance in Scotland. The Sunday Mirror go with the FA Cup as well yesterday, something borrowed, something blue. Eden the best man as Conte signs off in style, although Conte was saying he wants to stay in his post-match press conference. Then the Mail on Sunday go with the FA Cup as well. Parting gift, Hazard's winner sets up perfect leaving present for Chelsea boss Conte. And on the bottom of the page, double vision, this is Leinster. Blues are on course as they edge past old rivals Munster. The back page of the Sunday World next then. Blues on course for a double again, that's Leinster after their 16-15 win over Munster yesterday. And more red rage, Jose blasts Blues negative tactics as Chelsea lift cup. The Sunday Independent then, going with the rugby predominantly, certainly in their main picture. It's Jack Conan diving over the line for Leinster's first try yesterday. Scarlet's clash offers intrigue as Leinster booked final berth. And then bottom of the page, Wembley hero Hazard underlines value to Chelsea. And then the final back page for you this morning is Antonio Conte. Goodbye kiss, question mark, as he kisses the FA Cup. FA Cup glory for Conte, but Chelsea sack looms. And it certainly seems like Conte's not going to go. He's going to wait for the bullet and for the giant payoff. So there are your back pages. Gary, what a day yesterday. The royal wedding followed by a win for Leinster. You're just coming back down to earth.
Yeah, I was at the match. It was a great match. A lovely environment, lovely afternoon, nice weather, and everyone turned up in their colours. It never ceases to amaze me, the Munster supporters, how fervent they are, how dedicated they are, and how early they turn up, which is a credit to them. When you're in the stands, you never see Munster supporters coming into the stand late. Never. You just don't.
I was there with a crew of Munster supporters, and we were rushing, and I was like, it's not started till 3:15, and we were rushing at like 2:15 to the RDS. Yeah.
It was a great game. As a friend of mine tweeted me after the match, Joe, he said Simon Zebo, Leinster's best player in the first half and Munster's best player in the second half. And a little bit unfair, but you know where he was coming from. In the first half, Leinster just seemed to be, they certainly started the stronger, and then James Lowe just wanted to get his hands on the ball and just wanted to run at anyone that was in front of him. And Simon Zebo just happened to be that man twice. Yeah. And then a magical offload to Jack Conan, who's pictured on the front of the Sunday Independent Sports Supplement, going over for that try. And great to see him playing well yesterday. I thought that I couldn't relax at the match. It was tense, nervous, and then when Zebo got the ball every time in the second half, just made his way to try and get to Keith Earls. There's something magical about that. He'll certainly be very much missed by the Munster team next year. They don't appear to have anyone coming in to replace that little spark that is now going to be missing. But roll on next Saturday now. And I wouldn't be overly confident. Next Saturday is a big day now for me, between the Pro 14 final and then the European Cup final. So I think I might just stay in a room somewhere. It's going to be nerve-wracking.
Be dictated a lot by next Saturday.
Yeah.
It's all. I mean, the coverage of the rugby is right across the papers. The headline on the Neil Francis article is "Smarter outfit get result they deserved in spite of some mystifying decisions," and he was saying that the key for him almost is the discipline as much as anything. You can never underestimate the power of simplicity. Leinster won this game because their discipline made the difference. They only conceded 6 penalties to Munster's 14. A penalty count of that standing normally demands a steward's inquiry, but Munster were very loose in that department, almost as loose as their passing. and that was the difference. And generally, what Fran was saying about Munster is they're now 8 seasons without any silverware. He says they still have purpose and drive, and they've rediscovered some of their personality. But yesterday, despite only being 1 point away, showed that they have no intuition, and they are not smart enough, particularly when opportunity presents. They can fool themselves by saying that if 2 or 3 of a dozen very loose passes had gone to hand, they might have won this game. At this level, their skills are not good enough, particularly their passing skills. Their lines of running are copied from teams like Leinster, Scarlets, Glasgow, who know how to fix defences and who know naturally how to create space. So he wasn't as worried as you, I don't think.
Well, I think Stuart Barnes sums it up in 2 words: ferocious mediocrity, is how he kind of describes how Leinster were actually reduced to Munster's levels of ferocious mediocrity. And that was my sense yesterday as well. I felt like Munster didn't actually have an overall tactical grand plan. They had kind of diverse players to go out and enjoy themselves and do their best and do what they do well. So I think Simon Zebo was trying too hard almost to have a moment, to have a big goodbye Munster moment, and that's probably why it was so disparate sometimes in how he was playing. Obviously against James Lowe it was going to be a difficult task all day, but that was my feeling. And so actually I agreed with, I was nodding away as I was reading Neil Francis today, which doesn't happen very often for me. But
at this level their skills are not good enough.
Yeah, and they don't have a number 10. They don't have a good enough number 10 at the moment.
Yeah, that's been an issue.
And it was one of the things I was talking about yesterday, and I started to look it up because I was like, why isn't Carberry being talked about as an option for Munster? And I look back, and actually Ronan O'Gara has said it a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
That makes sense. If I'm the RFU, if I have power over that decision making, Ian Keatley's about 30, 31 now. Send Carberry down to Munster. He's playing with Murray then. That makes way more sense than sending him up to Ulster, where he's not going to be playing at a level that Joe Schmidt wants him to be playing at out half.
Yeah, they have a Champions Cup playoff today as well.
Yeah.
It's even no guarantee they'll have proper European rugby.
And he needs to have European Cup rugby at out half.
Yeah, Gary Bristling over there is thinking we're not sending him anywhere.
But if you're the RFU and you're taking the bigger picture, isn't that better for Ireland?
Sure.
Nope.
Good teeth.
I would disagree with Neil on the basic skills level. I think that Munster showed some good skills. Certainly, Conor Murray can land a kick on a twopence. He's just so accurate with that. Peter O'Mahony is all over every breakdown and spoiling ball that's coming back, slowing the ball for Leinster. Their skills in and of themselves. The last forced pass from inside centre out onto the wing perhaps went forward a few times yesterday, often went into touch. And then there was one episode yesterday where Gary Ringrose absolutely hammered into Simon Zebo, as Simon Zebo was covering a kick. But when you look at it on the screen, Zebo was actually Gary Ringrose was actually screened by 3 Munster players in front of him, and all of a sudden just launched himself through the air at Zebo. But whatever about it, you're right. There has to be competitive elements between local teams. There has to be that kind of grudge that you can get in the RDS yesterday. And it's still there between Leinster and Munster, albeit that Leinster had a lot of changes from the European Champions Cup final. And I just think Leinster are stuttering across the finishing line now. They peaked maybe a month ago, and now they're tired and exhausted. And teams have their numbers, and they know how to play them and what to watch out for. And that's what worries me about next week.
But that's Stuart Barnes' piece. Yeah. He kind of goes into that. It's now about getting the job done, and it's not going to be pretty from now on, and he goes into it being about heroism, which I'm not really into that kind of narrative, and that's a real rugby world thing,
That's hurling and rugby. Do like talking about their heroes.
Their heroes, yeah, which is a bit much for me.
He says this was a grind. That is Barnes's point. Barnes's piece is short enough, and I guess he was on commentary yesterday, so that probably took up a fair degree of his attention. But like he quoted John Fogarty. you guys were there, but watching on TV, John Fogarty, you know the way they interview the coaches sort of during the game in the Pro 14. Fogarty had said, let's just get the job done with 15 minutes to go. And he has sort of, Barnes has taken that and built his piece around that quote and sort of said Leinster are now at the point where it's getting the job done territory. Like he said, they feel a million miles away from what they did to the Scarlets at the Aviva in the semi-final. This is going to be a totally different game, he feels as well. He shares that sense, Gary, that maybe, I don't know if they've peaked, but certainly it's now into that nitty-gritty of it's not going to be pretty.
Certainly from a medical perspective, it never ceases to amaze me as the season goes on, more and more bandages appear.
Yeah.
We passed. Andrew Porter came onto the pitch yesterday. He might as well have had his leg in a plaster cast. There was so much bandage on his right leg. The guys, I don't know how they tape themselves up, to get through this part of the season. And my worry is that then they have a couple of weeks off and then they're off down to Australia, which is no rest whatsoever. You see James Ryan yesterday once again playing, almost perfectly as you would want him to do, hitting locks that look bigger than him, that would appear bigger than him. But now he's, he's a target for other people to hit him too. And you just worry that there will be attrition for everyone.
We passed, just before the game started, we passed Dan Levy and Henshaw in their suits and their various bandages and crocked walks. Yeah. It's been a long season.
Well, I mean, Lauren Benezek has talked about his worry over the painkiller culture. Donnacha O'Callaghan certainly talked about it on this station a couple of years ago. I mean, you would think at this time of the season painkillers are being taken to get guys through games. It's just the reality. Obviously I couldn't name names, who knows, maybe lads just have an unbelievable pain threshold. It seems Isa Nasewa's cartilage has departed one knee completely in the last while, so he really seems to be on one knee, is what all the players are saying afterwards. James Lowe said it. He was just saying, like, Isa is kind of my hero. He literally shouldn't be able to walk and he's kind of doing his thing. But there must be a painkiller culture at this stage of the season.
Well, I would say that the non-steroidals are being passed around beforehand like Smarties, just to get them through the game. It's a topic we've discussed before, the medicalisation of sport and what becomes the norm. Those guys would have been getting up this morning. As I was driving around, I saw Scott Vardy driving past me, and he was driving out outside County Dublin, and I figure that he's heading towards the sea for a cold bath or something. This is what the guys have to do all the time. There's many a time I've been getting out of the sea in Sea Point the day after a Leinster match, and they're all wandering down the slip into the water to just and they don't look agile. No. It's 12 hours after a match and they don't look good. And I don't know how you protect people from that, because that's what I go to the RDS to see. I go to see the big hits. I want James Ryan to floor somebody. I like when Gary Ringrose catches Simon Zebo unannounced. And yet, here I am today saying they have to be protected and we want the big hits. You can't have it both ways. No.
We are here reviewing the Sunday papers. It's brought to you with Air, the home of Air Sport. Get amazing live sporting content free with Air Broadband. If we turn to the GAA then, I'd say the most real estate of all the papers is given over to GAA. Gary, you made an interesting observation when you came in. You wouldn't be a massive GAA fan.
Well, I'm from Bray, County Wicklow. That's where I was born, and anyone from Wicklow is not big in GAA. And I just saw in the papers today that Fergal Oaks, the second GAA team in Bray, has had to shut down because there's not enough numbers to keep it going. So that leaves Bray Emmets as the only club in Bray. Now, we have had stronger teams, outside of the Bray area, but from my point of view, I had little or no influence in GAA growing up, so all the influence has been later on. When you go abroad, all of a sudden you want to know who's in the All-Ireland final or who's playing well. And we had a debate 2 weeks ago. We were doing a fundraiser for Kappa Hospital, and there was a number of sports people on the panel, and they were all asked whether rugby was now usurping GAA as the people's game. And all 5 people were absolutely adamant that it wasn't, including a ex-rugby international captain, an ex-soccer international captain, an ex-Irish soccer team manager, and a current GAA Dublin All-Star who's still playing. And I would have to believe that the GAA is central and important to this country, and it's being recognised abroad. However, you pick up the papers today, and everything about the GAA is negative. You pick up the title inside in the Mail, and you go headline after headline. The first few pages are not about GAA. They're about the Williams coming back to play in the French Open, Leinster doing well, keeping the dream alive. And then you go, grim night for Armagh as Erin men march on, no shock and awe at Central Stadium, ballroom without romance about my home county of Wicklow not being allowed to take on Dublin and Aughrim. And then you go, it's clear that Mayo will never learn from their mistakes. And then you keep going on, the banner's burden, it's all negative. So you then go to the Sunday Independent, and my go-to columnist is Colm O'Rourke, and then you ring Joe Brolly. Can football get any worse, is what Colm O'Rourke says. And then Joe Brolly, again, doesn't want to talk. He talks about, he gives 2 sentences to the game that he went to last week in the Mayo-Galway game, and he said it was absolutely awful. But these are the pundits, these are the people writing about the sport. They cannot write in such negativity and expect the public to turn up, and because they influence people. You open the paper this morning, I read Frano and say, do I agree with Frano, or does Frano think the way I think? And people are turning or opening their papers and saying, do I agree with Colm O'Rourke today? And he's negative, and then it just gets into the people's psyche that this is just this is a negative campaign. It's our national sport. We can't do this.
I was angry when I came in this morning and I met you, Joe, because I thought, well, I've just read Colm O'Rourke and I've just read Joe Brolly, and do they even like football? Like, he's writing, if you thought Galway and Mayo were bad, don't expect Tyrone and Monaghan to be even better. So, right, will I just tune out and I'll go watch some cricket on Sky Sports? Like,
don't you want his honest opinion, though?
I do, but I also, like, honestly, can he, like, I'm watching football, whatever, 25, 30 years. It has never been the most watchable game if you've no skin in the game. If you're going along and watching Galway Mayo, you're from neither Galway or Mayo, and it's the first round of the championship. Like, you will get spectacular games in the season, and you will get turgid ones where there's less kick passing, where there's a low score, where there's bad weather. You know, it's not always about playing perfect football. Sometimes it is about the grudge. Sometimes it is about how Galway have decided that they're going to actually pick up more silverware than past Connacht in a year. We can all give out about the different defensive teams and defensively how people want to play, but I don't think you should completely, as Gary was saying, like, go completely negative on the entire sport, because it just reads like, I don't know, maybe they're exhausted and they're watching too much football, and you know, it's time for a break maybe or something. But it made me feel like, well, if you don't like it, if you don't want to watch it, then what are the rest of us meant to do?
Some of what O'Rourke is saying, so the headline really grabs you. Can football get any worse, is the question mark, and you think, God, I watched the Mayo Galway game. I feel guilty almost for saying that. I kind of enjoyed it, the tension of it. I found it interesting.
There's more to games than just, I don't know, this hark back to weren't Kerry and Dublin great back in the 80s.
Close your eyes and kick the ball.
Yeah.
O'Rourke makes the point, perhaps some bright young coach will decide to go with a 15-man defence and hope to win by 4 points to 3. That is the way this monster is going, and I'm not sure what the answer is. He says there are quite a few managers and commentators who feel Gaelic football should go whatever way the coaches take it. He says that's heading for a zero-sum game. The only good thing is that this type of football at inter-county senior level has not polluted underage football. So that's his general sense, that we're into a zero-sum game here, where coaches and I guess commentators, like on this show, will say things like, well, it's about winning, or let the game evolve naturally. He thinks...
I think what has happened is because so much scrutiny and so much negativity in the papers, and it's come on just over the last couple of years, is that teams are afraid to lose. They're not keen to win. They're just afraid to lose, and that's what gives these defensive battles. I think Dublin lost for so long that they just were hungry for success, and if they're going to be successful, they're going to be successful by playing the way they want to play. The interesting point was made, and you say yes, it hasn't pervaded the underage game. That was the one thing that the people felt on the panel 2 weeks ago, that the GAA does miss out on, that it often doesn't cater to the underage sports person who's not in the first team, perhaps falling off the second team, and that soccer is the one that takes care of those individuals, whereby they would have an A, B, C, D, E, F and G team, whereas the GAA don't have the numbers.
But that's because football is probably the people's game. Yeah.
But I would think that this negativity, it wouldn't inspire me to switch on the TV this afternoon to watch Monaghan play. I certainly won't do it. But it also wouldn't inspire me to watch the highlights program tonight, and that's the problem, because I might look at the results on the news or look at it on the internet, and that would be good enough for me. I wouldn't put myself through it because Colin O'Rourke says it's not going to be worth it.
And there is a way to be negative, like what you were saying, Joe, like you want to be honest. So Paul Galvin is talking in his column about Mayo, and he says he would hate to play on the Mayo team, so it's not a positive glowing column, but he's also picking out nuances in that game last week.
Totally agree, yeah.
And it's actually just a really interesting take. So you can look at a game and be negative about it without, throwing the whole thing out and saying, we need to start from scratch or we need to go back to older ways. There is a way of talking about a game negatively without, this stuff of even Joe Brolly, he in his column today, he's comparing a club that has gone through a horrific time after losing one of their members, and they had a benefit night, and he was talking about how he compared that brilliant GAA story at how that's the best of the GAA comes out in times of trouble like that, and any of us who are GAA people know that. And then he compares it to what he calls the commercialisation of the game, and that's how we ended up with Mayo and Galway in a match that he described as not worthy of watching. And I think there's one element of that maybe is looking too rosy at a picture, because look at what you've said about the Bray club folding, and there's problems in clubs all over the country. So you're not talking about this, heaven amongst clubs and not at county level in the GAA, but also the idea that they have to be two separate things. Why can't you have this brilliant club mechanism that mines players that aren't inter-county players, who really cares for the club and for the club championship, while also having a county championship that will get more than just GAA people involved, that will get other people into county grounds around the country.
I thought we'll get on to Brodie's column in a sec, actually, because there's some other interesting strands to it, but there were 30,000 wedged into McHale Park last week. People were really excited for that game, and he was comparing it to a club night he'd been at the night before, kind of a charity thing to raise money. But neither were bad. They both struck me as really good. People were really excited on Sunday for this Galway Mayo game, and that's not a bad thing. I think he called it over-commercialised. I'll get the exact word. I don't know if he said crap or not. He may not have. On Paul Galvin, just so people know the point you're making. So Galvin said no risk, no reward. And what he's saying about the match last week, he makes a really interesting point about just the way Mayo play. So he says, you know what you get with Mayo these days, disorder. Old habits aren't dying hard, they're hanging around. And then this was kind of the nub of his point. Diarmuid O'Connor's red card was one of the many cases in point. It reminded me of Donald Vaughan's red card last year in the All-Ireland final. Put Stephen Cohen in Colin Boyle's place and you have a similar plan to the one that cost Mayo and Vaughan severely. Boyle was ahead of Aidan O'Shea on that occasion, back turned to the ball, and then he has to turn around to receive the pass, and he got nailed by John Small on receipt. So he's making this point that what developed was a situation you see all too often with Mayo. O'Connor playing in Cohen's position and Cohen up in O'Connor's position. He says the positional disorder is a problem for them, or maybe it's just a problem for me. And as you said, he says it's the death of the half forward, that system, and he would hate to play in that system. He wouldn't thrive in it. So that's a really interesting point, that their defenders are clogging up the half forward line for the half forwards, and they're out of sync as a result. I think isn't that a much better type of analysis, like a real specific point picked out and teased out, as opposed to, we do have a culture almost elsewhere of, instead of analysing a game, analysts are just saying, well, I didn't enjoy it. It comes down to, did I enjoy it or not, is their level of what they're telling me. Like, I don't really care if you enjoyed it all that much. I'd like to know why you think someone won or lost. And there's too much of, didn't enjoy that at all. And
Well,
that's there in football.
I think that when you open your Sunday papers and you go to the sports section, you want to be entertained. You also want good writing, and this is the paper review. And with Colm O'Rourke and Joe Brolly, no matter how negative they are, they do write very well.
Agreed, yeah.
And Colm O'Rourke, you get Greek reference with Sisyphus. You get Joe Brolly writing like the barrister that he is, very coherently structured, with a argument set out like a PowerPoint proof. His column today is like a sociology lecture.
Yeah.
It's not a sports thing, and I find that entertaining. I find that nice. But people who are mad into the GAA would far more appreciate Paul Galvin's structured analysis of why Mayo aren't playing the way other people would like to see them play. And I can fully appreciate there's room for both. Is Paul Galvin's piece better than Stuart Barnes's piece in commentary on the rugby yesterday? Head and shoulders better.
Yeah.
And Paul Galvin is growing into his role as a columnist now. He's not afraid to pick things out and pick out individuals and say, well, this is where I thought they went wrong. And that's entertaining for people who are looking for the minutiae. I wouldn't personally know those characters well, so I wouldn't be able to picture them in my mind and say, my goodness, he's absolutely right. But if Neil Francis was to do the same, or Brendan Fanning was to do the same, or Stuart Barnes, should he ever, sit down after the match and, earn his crust, well then, yes, I would read that too. But the writing is good.
I enjoyed Brolly's piece in the end, but for the last line where he kind of, it's probably just a bit too dismissive. Like, I thought it's really interesting. Like, we might mention some of what's in it now. He just says, after this charity night last Saturday, I went to Castlebar Sunday to watch two teams playing overhyped, commercialised crap. That's just unnecessarily strong, isn't it? It's not crap. It's not over commercialised crap.
And
what
also, I
happened between
missed
Mayo and
one of the biggest talking points out of last week was that horrific injury to Parsons, and the reaction afterwards, the well wishes, the I guess what he's talking about, the real GAA of the night before, and that was evident then afterwards, because the warmth and I guess feeling towards Parsons from both sides, from both supporters.
Oh yeah, every county in the country was wishing Parsons well.
Yeah.
Like, there was a real sense of, God, this is, it can't be so over commercialised when they're still amateur, when they're still going to work. It's not.
And so using that game, I thought, weakened his point entirely, because that was one of the talking points from that game.
He used the club situation almost to take a dig at Mayo Galway. Mayo Galway was fine in and of itself. It was tense, it was a competitive game. It was a packed crowd. Okay, it wasn't like a thriller in the traditional sense, but it wasn't so bad. His piece, though, I really enjoyed. As you said, it's more sociological
commentary
than. So Sean Mullen, footballer, passed away, and there was a fundraiser for his family, and Brolly was at that, and he just found it brilliant and community spirit at its best. And he does make the point that GAA nationally has become. Oh, sorry, no, that's not the point I wanted to grab for. But he talks about how GAA is in the fabric right across the country. He goes and he looks at 2 or 3 different studies, one by Dr. Stuart Wolfe, professor in the 1950s, and another by Susan Pinker. And in short, this Susan Pinker one, by the way, I've heard this podcast. This is a TED Radio podcast before. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you haven't, it's absolutely brilliant. In effect, without labouring the whole point overly, there were a few pockets where people were living longer, seemed to not suffer with anything like heart disease or dementia or any of the typical diseases that catch on as we get older. The Blue Zone, for instance, has a population of 1.5 million in Italy and Sardinia, and they did test. None of the people are genetically, they don't have the genetic disposition to live longer, because people with the same genes die earlier when they go and live elsewhere. In short, the point is that they live in a very community-based area. So the village is a hub for meetings and conversation. Everyone knows everyone, he says. They have long meals together. Often you have 3 generations in one house. As people age, they're surrounded by extended family and neighbours. And so I think the 7-year study is called What Reduces the Chance of Dying. Diet has minimal impact. They all ate terrible food. They all smoked. They didn't exercise. None of these people did anything that we're all doing to try and live longer. And the conclusion was the top 2 predictors were number 1, close relationships, and then number 2, how much you interact with your community face to face in each day.
Yeah.
So each day, how much you're seeing people. That is me butchering the sociological commentary, but in short, that's what he's saying, Gary. And he's sort of saying, well, we're a country where he says a quarter of the population don't talk to each other, and we have this GAA thing, which is a magic ingredient.
Well, a quarter of the population have no one to talk to, be they living on their own or in social isolation. And to be fair to Joe Brolly, I've been at a function like this, like what he describes, and he is the master of social interaction when it comes to these functions. He gives of himself. I don't mind being lectured to by someone who actually practices what they preach, and he practices what he preaches. And he's up here at this function on the Saturday. Then he's down in Castlebar on the Sunday. He's writing a column. He's working as a barrister. I mean, he's just a dynamo. And when you're in his company, you get into this vortex that he sucks you into. You actually feel. I remember driving home from this function that we had in Meath, and you get home and you say, "What can I do now?" But, it's only 1 o'clock in the morning. Surely I can do something, because you know that Joe is going to be somewhere doing something that will make you feel inadequate when you get up the next morning. It lasts for about 48 hours before you just go, "Oh, I can't live this life of Brolly at all."
Yeah.
But he's so socially engaging. Even people who will read about them criticising him or criticising their county, and he goes into the lion's den and he will entertain them, and they get up and they go, "Well, that was quite nice, actually, quite entertaining." And despite yourself, you'll find yourself liking him, and same happened to Donnelly, when the book was launched, and no. Joe didn't mind. Everything was fine with Joe. But he does make the point, and this is the point, that the GAA has the capacity to get a finger into every household in the country, and sometimes it's not used. And the tragic death of Sean Mullen in a cycling accident that could happen anytime. The GAA rallied around him, and that's what they're good at, and he supports them. And it's really important that he was saying that they should use that fabric and those network of social interaction for the betterment of Irish people. And when you make a point like that,
you can't disagree with that point.
Yes, when you make a point like that, I think you're entitled to bludgeon a match that you didn't enjoy.
See, I don't think his point is fulfilled in the end. Maybe it's because he was sitting in an RT box. I don't know if he was. Maybe that's what it was.
He was doing the game.
He was doing the game. And so I don't know what he thinks happens at a game outside of that, when Mayo supporters are in with Galway supporters and you're meeting everybody you know. Like, if I go to a Kildare match, no matter where in the country it is, I will be meeting people from Selbridge, Confey, Leixlip, people I play against in Johnstone Bridge, people I know from going out in Naas.
So that still serves the community, because it's a full house
still
and people are
part
there.
Of, why would you take a dig at 30,000 people going to a sold-out match with 2 neighbouring counties, with all the people in your community that you can touch base with, that you wouldn't do if it was a smaller club match or if there was no games going on? So I'm not sure where his point completes there by saying that it's, overhyped, commercialised crap.
I don't think he's taking a dig at the supporters. I think that would be the furthest thing that he'd.
No,
like
he's
to
taking
do.
a dig at how the match is played and how is. But I'm not sure why he thinks that's going against.
Here's a question for you, Gary.
Should
he's preaching about community and ultimately kindness and love for each other, should that imbue his punditry more, because he's talking about amateurs? Like, if we're talking about, that true Gael spirit, that generosity of spirit, and these teams are training amateurs coming back again and again, and they've done their level best, should it be dismissed so disparagingly?
No, I think that he has standards that he would expect any team to play to. And then if you're going to be the best in Ireland, or if you're going to challenge a Dublin team that would set themselves apart from everybody else, if that's that's the standard that you've got to be at. So everyone that's playing in the championship can be judged against Dublin, and if they're not playing to that standard, well then they set the 10 out of 10.
Yeah, but
and if you're playing 6 out of 10 and he points out 6 out of 10, well then he's entitled to do that. But just because it's on a different scale, you can't have a Mayo Galway scale where Galway emerged 9 out of 10 and Mayo are 8 out of 10 from last week's game.
But here's the thing, right?
He's consistent.
Yeah, no, I accept that. Mayo, oh God, they should have won the All-Ireland last year. Like they are at that standard. They are at the Dublin standard, and they have been for a long time now. Basically, they're so close. Like you're talking, what is there, like 2 or 3 points across the last 4 years difference in all these finals. So if you think last week was crap, the performance was crap, but you've just seen them 4 or 5 months earlier produce something which was close to a 10, then is the more interesting question, what's happened there? Let's analyse the gulf in the two performances, as opposed to just saying, that's crap.
Well, maybe he was just too offhanded in his comments on the game.
You can forgive that, it's a throwaway line.
And he was more interested in the community-based charity function that he was at the night before. And when you see a death as opposed to a game of football, there's no comparison. And so I think he probably shouldn't have mixed the two.
Yeah, I think that's where he lost me, because and I do get annoyed every year with the commentary around football, because I think there is a willful misunderstanding by a lot of people who commentate on it about what the game is capable of a lot of the time. Maybe they need to go watch more games outside of the top ones that they're commentating on, and just look at, we still have problems in defining what the tackle is. So, we don't get across the board consistency on what you can and can't do in a game, and it depends on what the referee has decided, and then you have to shift as a player. They have to shift what they can do. Training is about winning matches, and like the idea that you will go into a game to play nice football is bonkers. Like that is not what will keep amateur players coming back year on year. And we see now that amateurs are deciding that they're going to have shorter careers because too much is asked of them for too long a time. Like I was reading about Anthony Nash there today, and he's obviously the longest serving player in the Cork dressing room right now, and those kind of years are going to be unheard of soon. You don't get players coming back year on year with the idea of playing nice football. You get them back with the idea that they'll have silverware at the end of it. And I don't think coaches should be blamed entirely for wanting that for their players in an amateur era.
Yeah, well, we'll leave the GA for this afternoon. I think we're all totally with him on the community point. Yeah. And that TED radio error, I'm 90% sure it's the same study. Susan Pinker, if you just Google, the name of the study is What Reduces the Chances of Dying. Stick that in with TED radio error, and it's really, really brilliant, fascinating listen. Before we move on to the next few stories, Dave McIntyre is standing by. It's half-time at the Gaelic Grounds. Dave, how are we looking?
Yeah, 1 point lead for Tipperary, Joe. They're leading Limerick by 110 to 12 points. Scrappy game, space at a premium. Defence is definitely on top. Limerick star man has been Graham Mulcahy. He's been the pick of the forwards. He's got 4 from play, but they've major issues at the back with their discipline. Jason Ford has already fired over 7 frees, punishing the Limerick defenders every time they infringe. Cian Lynch, Tom Morrissey, Sean Flanagan have kept the scoreboard ticking over at the other end. Both sides have had goal chances, but Tip have taken theirs. 20 minutes in, a hopeful ball in. John McGrath did very well to fire off a shot on goal. It rattled off the foot of the post and it was buried on the rebound by Dan McCormick. Limerick also let down by their accuracy. Some really bad wides, 5 in the opening 20 minutes, and they'll certainly feel they should be in front. Not the free-flowing, high-scoring spectacle we were hoping for, but in there have been glimpses of the brilliance that both of these forward lines potentially do possess. Most spectacularly, a spectacular point from Noel McGrath from out near the sideline, almost on the half volley, so it could yet explode into life. Tip will be the happier of the two. They haven't played well, but they are benefiting from those frees. They're leading by a point at half time, 110 to Limerick's 12 points.
Okay, Dave, thanks very much. Back to you at full time. So Tipperary by a point at half time, and I should tell you that Wexford Dublin has been delayed 15 minutes at Wexford Park due to traffic congestion. Kilkenny Offaly goes ahead as planned at 3, and then both Tyrone Monaghan in the football and Cork Clare in the hurling go ahead at 4 o'clock. So we're reviewing the Sunday papers. Gary O'Toole and Sinead O'Carroll are here in the studio. Liverpool. Liverpool. Have you Liverpool fans in your world? Are you a Liverpool fan?
My the majority of my household, so
Liverpool type. So you understand the pain, the misery of being a Liverpool fan.
My brother had 2 baby sisters, and so that was the rule that we all had to be Liverpool fans. So that was that. We have a kind of crazy household that is full of superstitions. Back in 2005, we had to all sit in the same seats and wear the same clothes, and the curtains had to be drawn in a certain specific manner. The armchairs had to be in certain places because otherwise Liverpool would lose. And sure, it worked. So there we go.
The papers are looking ahead. A lot of it focuses on Mo Salah.
A lot on Mo Salah. And the Mo Salah versus Ronaldo potential battle. Of course, they'll never meet one another on the pitch, but it's whether or not Mo Salah can continue this rich vein of goal scoring, whether or not Ronaldo will do what he usually does and pop up and score the winning goal in the 88th minute and take off his top, show the world that he's still a fine physical specimen, and then take the cup back to Madrid. I'm personally invested in this because, as most people who listen to this show know, that I'm a Liverpool fan and supporter, but more invested in this now because I did travel with them to Seville for the match, Liverpool versus Seville in Seville, the 3-3 draw at which Salah scored. We were 3-0 up at half time, only to draw 3-3, and Liverpool have been extremely entertaining on this European journey this year. I think that it would be cruel if they were to lose now at this stage. I think they've been the best team playing good, entertaining football that neutrals will sit down to watch. Having said that, perhaps the final will be a turgid affair that'll go to penalties or whatever. But you can never discount someone who's got the genius of Ronaldo on their side. But according to the papers, Liverpool have more geniuses in their side than Real Madrid have, and it should be easy for them to overcome Real Madrid.
Jonathan Northcroft, I mean, it's good to see them trying something different. I don't know if the piece is amazing, but the idea, I guess, is not massively original, but pretty good. So he's gone to Salah's hometown for the Sunday Times. Yeah,
and it's becoming a bit of a journalist hotspot, he said. So,
you
that tourism,
original when everyone's going.
Yeah, and he and it probably is obviously that I'm a little biased. I'm a Liverpool fan, and but I think between Salah and Klopp, I do think they're bringing in a few more people into the story than just Liverpool fans, because it's a bit joyous to listen to Klopp talk in interviews, and say compared to Mourinho, who just wants to throw all of his players under a bus. So I think there's that element. So all the reads in the papers today between Klopp and the focus on Salah, they're all kind of happy, and it's like the opposite of what we were just talking about there, and the negativity about talking about GA. The Sunday Business Post even has given up a page to profile Jurgen Klopp. Obviously they don't usually have sport, but Hugh O'Connell has written a full page on him today. So
any bits in that catch your eye?
He's kind of talking about, again, kind of looking at whether Klopp is this, pure manager of motivation, or whether he actually, does some deeper tactics. And there was a line in it that he talks about that he actually thinks it's a bit showy-offy to talk too much or to talk too deeply about the tactics that he uses.
Okay.
So he's talked to a few people, the person who wrote Klopp's first book, and it's an interesting read, especially obviously it's geared towards people who are buying paper that doesn't usually have a sports section, so kind of bringing you back to the beginning of Klopp's career, where he was a self-described mediocre player. And so that was interesting. But back to the Salah one, Northcroft has gone to Egypt, and he actually says, Jurgen Klopp has said that Salah has a long way to go before he can be compared to Cristiano Ronaldo, but he's wrong. In life terms, he's already come further, and he talks about how when he was 13, he used to make these crazy, as you'll often hear with footballers, these crazy journeys, 3-4 hours long to get to his club. And then when he was spotted, he moved at 14 and got a second father in Hamdi Nou, and he talks to him about so Northcroft talks to Hamdi Nou about being his second father, and why Salah was always going to make it, and how he he talks to somebody else who says, you know, he was always going to make it outside because he worked on things. He learned how to speak English. He learned how to speak Italian. But what was interesting as well from that, and obviously he follows the advice of this person he calls his second father. He said, I tell Mohammed, Liverpool is very good for you. After the World Cup, Mohammed's price will be very high, but he will be lucky with Liverpool. I am against moving to Real Madrid, and now I see is that Jurgen Klopp is now his third father. So there's a lot of, I guess, sentimentality as well around the people who Salah has surrounded himself with through his life. So this idea that he is a nice guy, and we've heard a lot about that, and this piece details the huge amount of charity he gives money to, and the amount of pretty focused things I think that he has done in Egypt. I think all of that is kind of showing true rather than, you know, kind of things that someone throwaway remarks that people say about people. And one thing I didn't know is that about 1 million people added Salah to the recent election ballots to spoil their votes, but also to show dissatisfaction that he was actually their captain. So yeah, definitely a nice read for Liverpool fans there on page 4 and 5 of the Sunday Times.
Yeah, watch him dead for you, Gary.
He does strike you as a very, very modest, unassuming person, quite out of kilter with the normal Premiership footballer. And he seems to be enjoying his game and loving this season. But you get the impression from him that, if it was to go bad next season, that he would still be as engaged and as content. And there is for me, there is some Muslim undertones to his football. He just seems to be, he seems to have this spirituality about him that is often, is rarely there with other football players. He doesn't pay lip service to ideas. He actually engages with charities. For me, he's very admirable. And I remember a number of years ago reading a story about Wayne Rooney when he played for Everton, and he was driving along and there was a football match in the park, and he stopped and he joined in with the football match. That's true love of sport, and I get that impression from Salah, that he just loves playing football, the same way as Wayne Rooney couldn't drive by a football match without getting out and playing, and you just don't see that. I read it about Luis Suarez as well when he was playing in Liverpool. There just seems to be a genuine fondness for his job, which is what it is at the end of the day. And
it seems like the makeup of this current squad, there's a piece in the Mail with Henderson as well, and talking about how he's all about the team, and I think Klopp has really fostered that and made it the kind of outside story, that's the brand that he's made. And I think it probably hides, I spoke on the show a few weeks ago, I think it hides probably some of his steel of how he actually manages the player. Because he absolutely does not praise Mo Salah too much. Every time that anybody talks about Mo Salah, he'll turn the conversation around to Mane, and I think there's such a marked difference between how he speaks about his players and how Mourinho does. Like yesterday, Mourinho said, Chelsea knew that we were without Lukaku, so they knew we had no presence. If I'm on the 11 on the starting team sheet, I'm like, well, will I just go home then? Like, I'll take my check and see you next week.
Salah's journey is extraordinary. I hadn't fully appreciated. So up until he was 14, when he started living in Diggs, he was travelling 130 kilometres to Cairo. Yeah. It was a 4 to 5 hour trek. He would train and then go home. And get home at midnight and then get up for school for 7 a.m. the next morning. Next day, repeat, which...
Yeah, and he'd have his books with him. So
extraordinary. And he spent... I know they're insanely rich. He has spent $500,000 of his own money to build a school for 1,000 boys and girls in his hometown. And the guy, his second father, is quoted saying, "It will give religious education that is away from extremism." So... it's still a sizable donation. $500,000's $500,000, and he's built a school there.
And that's what I was saying about it. It seems all very focused, that idea that it will be still religious but away from extremism. And he set up an ambulance station in his hometown as well. there's one of the lines as well. I think that someone says that it's exaggerated. Some of his generosity is exaggerated. Like he doesn't pay for couples who don't have a huge amount of money for them to get married or whatever. So obviously they don't want those stories out there either. His family did have to move because it was quite hard for them to remain there. Obviously, with the
reporters showing up and people looking for
with the knowledge that there's wealth
seekers.
there, it would be quite difficult. So it seems instead of maybe just setting up a foundation and not having a lot to do with it, he has kind of thought put into what he wants his money to go towards.
Yeah, on the Henderson interview, page 108, 109 of the Mail on Sunday, like the headline jumps out at you. It's with Ollie Holt, who often does very good pieces in the Mail. I had to play well to help my dad beat cancer, says Henderson. So his father had throat cancer, which seemed like a dreadful time for him. Henderson is quite an uncomfortable interviewee, it seems, based on what Holt finds, but eventually they get into some interesting stuff. Like, I didn't realise that Brendan Rodgers, before he wrote the league game a couple of years ago, pulled him into a room and said, look, we've accepted an offer for you, what you want to do. And Henderson decided to stay and fight for his place, but he was kind of in tears because things really weren't going well for Jordan Henderson for a long time. He was held up as a £20 million waste of money for a good few years, to be honest. I don't know when he won you over, Gary, but I'd say it was a few years in the making.
He kind of diffused into the team. He didn't arrive in the team and make a big announcement. And he for many years he was overshadowed by Gerrard. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's hard to play in the centre of midfield when you're playing next to Stevie G. And he doesn't seem like that kind of person that wanted the limelight that Steven Gerrard had anyway. So he wasn't an overnight success, but he worked for years for his overnight success. For want of a better use of the phrase. His father seems to be very protective of him, not wanting him to see him whilst he was going through the therapy for his throat cancer, just so that he wouldn't get upset and wouldn't upset his football. He just seems to be a steady influence in the centre of midfield that I think every team needs. And hopefully he'll go on and have a good World Cup. I'm not one of these people that think that he's captain of Liverpool and I am a Liverpool fan and I wish him well until next Saturday night when the game is over, and after that I'll see you in August, Jordan. I hope he has a good World Cup, and I hope that he does well, because he comes across extremely nice. Again, modest. There's a theme of modesty running through that Liverpool.
Yeah, there's another piece in the Sunday Indo about Robertson and the different setbacks that he had to come through as well. Because that was the bit that stood out to me in the Henderson piece, was that being called into the manager's office and said, look, we have a swap deal for you. It's not like almost feels so out of your hands that if you're willing to swap me, like. A lot of players with less mental strength, I think, would say, okay, I'm off if you don't want me. So to be able to, especially if you're in any way doubting your own abilities, to say, right, I'm going to continue to fight. And he says it, he says, I knew I was going to get less game time. So if you know you're going to get less game time, it's even like to get your head around even how do you fight that battle if I'm not even going to get enough chances to prove myself.
It seems hard work, I guess, which ties in with humility. He says, my wife, Rebecca, will say I wasn't a very nice person in those couple of years. I worked so hard, extra sessions in the gym, training, that when I got home, all I wanted to do was sleep. It does get to a point where Rodgers, who had told him he'd accepted the offer, then offers him the captaincy when Gerrard's going. And then, like, the stuff with his father, it must have been horrific for him, because he's saying, my dad's a very proud man. He didn't want me to see him when he was getting treatment because of how he looked. So I knew the only way I could help him was to play well, because I knew he'd be watching. That is a different pressure. But he says, I didn't see my dad much in that time, very little. He wouldn't let me. Brennan was good. He said I could go and see him whenever I wanted. I saw him just before he went in for his first treatment. Then I wouldn't see him again for a few weeks, and it wouldn't be so bad towards the end. But it got to a point where he didn't want to see me at all because of how he was. Didn't want me to see him like that, so I knew it was pretty bad. I was in regular contact, but the only thing I could do was to try and perform at the weekend. Thankfully, his father has recovered and is going to be at Kiev on Saturday. But I don't know. I felt counterintuitive to me. I think you'd want to see however bad your parent looked. What a horrible, weird thing to be in contact but never seeing them.
Yeah, it sounded like he didn't have a huge amount of choice, and I guess when
No, the dad totally. It seems dad said
Yeah.
you're not coming.
Yeah.
I guess he says he's a very proud man.
And often, I guess, when you see people be really successful and also have the mental strength to cope with that success, obviously there's a huge family effort behind that. He mentions his wife and his parents. He mentions his mother at the end about, people are watching you every single day. You have to do well. And sometimes you forget that when you're talking about football players, because they kind of have that business surrounding them, the agent, and they've probably
They have so much money.
They've so much money, and also they've probably known that they'll be successful since they were 7 or 8. It's not this kind of newfound luck that's been bestowed on them. If you're picked out when you're in your first, team, that's what happens. So I think sometimes you do forget that there is grounding there by just parents. And
I think what you forget as well is it's his job. He wasn't performing well in his job. His manager took him aside, said, look, you're not doing what you could do. He worked harder, he got better, and now he's playing better as a result of that. It's the same if you're a computer program working in tech, or if you're a broadcaster, you'll get better through constructive criticism. And as long as the criticism is constructive, that's fine. But he could have very easily left Liverpool, gone to another club, taken the money, and he would have equally as comfortable a lifestyle. How much money do they need, But he decided not to do it. And it's nice that someone, and he is young, I'm calling him young, that he is of that generation that sometimes we look at and we say they're soft. But he was willing to fight for his place. Now, he's not spinning it that way, but that's the way I'm spinning it on his behalf, that he stuck around, he didn't take the easy option, and too many people would take the easy option and just be out of there. And for that alone, you got to admire the guy.
Yeah, and the fact that he didn't take it as Rodgers not backing him, which I think a lot of people would have taken it like that. Oh, you don't rate me anymore. Whereas he didn't take it like that at all. He thought, okay, well, I need to change now, rather than you need to change your opinion. He thought, right, I have to change how I'm playing.
Yes,
he didn't
say, well, you have it wrong.
Yeah,
I'm just fine. Yeah. One last point. Seeing as you're mentioning the kids, it's Darren Gibson here is being written about on page 6 of the Sunday Times. It triggered off my mind because you mentioned kids know from an early age.
I was thinking about that. Yeah,
they're just fine. I hadn't realised that Gibson. So they're talking Gibson. His career is going one way, unfortunately, and he's potentially, and we'd be careful enough what we say here, but potentially looking at a custodial sentence for drink driving, and I think he's just 30. He's still very young. But Paul Rowan here points out that when he was signed by Manchester United in 2005, club scouts told his family he was on their top 5 most wanted list of 15-year-olds around the world. Gerard Piqué was on that list, Giuseppe Rossi, Freddie Adu, who at the time, Freddie Adu was being talked about as the next Pelé, and then strikingly as well, Anthony Stokes. It's mad to think there were 2 Irish players on that list. So Rowan says, for Gibson, maybe it came all a bit too easy. He was an impressive physical specimen as a teenager, gifted with a formidable blend of vision and technique when it came to his passing and shooting from outside the box. And they quote Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who was the reserve team manager for a period, saying, Gibson's like a Ferrari, but we just need to get him out of the garage. He's had a few issues, it seems, with drink driving, and so he's going to be sentenced in the next week or so. It can go wrong no matter how highly rated you are, and he was talented when he came on the scene, there's no doubt. And he has won a Premier League medal, we forget that as well. I
think over the last couple of months we've had a big conversation about how society interacts with sport and with successful sportsmen in particular. And I think this is kind of part of that story, that if it does come easily to you from when you're young, if you're, like I just said there, if you're a successful sports person, you've probably been as successful in sport since you were very, very young. And in that way you are idolised by your peers, and things do come easier to those people. And it is making sure that the framework around them, through family, through club and through school, is there in place. And like Rowan said there, Gibson floundered at the mental side of the game and life beyond it, and he struggled to recover from those setbacks. So I do think we need to be more cognizant of when we are propelling our young men into those arenas, that we're giving them the tools to cope with that. At the same time, obviously I don't want to sound like I'm feeling too sorry for Darren Gibson, because obviously drink driving and the harm that he could have caused in those two incidences are horrific. But I think there is a conversation to be had around how we do mind our young stars.
It's very difficult, I suppose, if the support structure isn't there. Are there just some people who aren't equipped?
Yeah.
It's just very difficult, and you could talk to them all you want, protect them all you want, and we all have our fatal flaws. So Rowan is making the point that he's certainly getting help and doing what he can to try and tackle the situation. You wish him well. It is incredible, isn't it, when you see someone hit such heights to struggle so badly, and one presumes, when it comes to this level, there was plenty of support offered to him at various clubs. These are such valuable commodities to the clubs.
Well, there's a piece in the column that talks about Wayne Rooney, Johnny Evans, and himself arriving to training dishevelled, and Wayne Rooney and Johnny Evans stayed on at the club, and Alex Ferguson showed him the door. That's perhaps not the support that you would like to think, and that's history repeating itself. That's the Brian Robson, Paul McGrath dynamic that was there.
You don't know, with respect to Ferguson, you don't know how many times he may have had Gibson in the office, and may have had tried various different things, and may have just said, right.
And at some point it does become a business. And I think probably at that stage you're talking about it being too late. I think you need to go back and look at, he was told when he was 15 years old that he was on a list or his parents were told. So he obviously knew that surrounding himself at 15, that everything in his life was going to be great. And if he's not getting the support at that stage to deal with things if they're not going to be great, you have to equip your teenagers at that point to be able to cope mentally with what might happen.
They have. I mean, for all we know, he was told the right things and given the right support, and things just went awry. We don't. The thing about this piece is you don't fully know why exactly it's gone so wrong. We're very much looking in on the outside, so we'll see where that goes. I think the sentencing is next Friday. He pleaded guilty to drink driving, so we'll see where that goes. He's still only 30.
It's a cruel thing, with the sportsmen when they're training, and they do have so much downtime that is not filled for them, and they find ways to occupy that downtime, whether it be as Donncha O'Callaghan speaks about, the PlayStation or the Xbox, or whether that be online betting, or whether it be drink, young men just they're like young boys, between the age of 8 and 12 or 13. Just put them out, let them run around and burn off that energy, and then they come home in the afternoon time, and there's nothing for them to do, and some of them might not have a family that they have to go and collect the children from school or do their homework with them to give them that ground and base structure to their life, and it's understandable how they go off the tracks fairly easily. I can certainly understand it, and I can see why it happens so frequently with professional sportsmen. And there is a very interesting statistic about the amount of NFL players after they retire from NFL, how many of them end up bankrupt within 10 years because of the entourage that they've been looking after. As a 15-year-old, he might have known that he was going to be talented and that he was going to be looked after, but almost instantly people are drawn to that kind of success, and you become responsible for them then, whether that be your parents or whether it be your agents or your agent's family, and then other sponsors that come in. It's hugely pressurized.
I think that's why
I'll defend my gender for a second here and just say predominantly it is young men, like in the worlds of football, NFL, NBA, who are getting millions thrust at them at a young age. I guarantee you, if we took the same numbers of women from similar backgrounds, often football is a working class background, throw a whole lot of money and fame at them and a whole lot of spare time.
That'd be great, wouldn't it?
Nothing. You're telling me nothing's going to go wrong there? I mean, it's a human. I think it's a human thing. To be honest, I think
we're a few decades off seeing
that's
that,
true.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think that's why people like Mo Salah and the entire Liverpool team at the moment are kind of bright lights. I think that's why when you read the differences in in the papers today with the different personalities, you do end up, coming away with a smile on your face after reading.
I think that for me personally, I always look at the soccer players and or now creeping into rugby, that the amount of free time and the boredom is directly proportional to the amount of tattoos that appear on the players, and that they have nothing else to do but go to a tattoo parlor. Their hair, there's only so many times you can style your hair over a season. You look at Mane now; he's desperately trying to find a different hairstyle for game to game. But I was, you just get reminded of it all the time, and sometimes people surprise me, people who have these tattoos in sport, who you would never suspect of having a tattoo, because you think that they would be too busy and they book the trend. But as far as I'm concerned, it's just a mark of boredom.
Yeah, I agree. I'd say in some places it is. Like, I guess a lot of the rugby guys are further in their education along with playing, and it's because they know I'm going to need to do something
by the time they make money.
And also,
whereas
catastrophic injury is
catastrophic injury can happen.
Yeah.
So a lot of them are studying, which is a good use of their spare time. Like, the other double whammy is the Premier League guys have spare time and they don't need to prepare for anything down the line. It's like it's they're not wasting their time because they don't have to prepare for anything.
But to book that trend, though, I'd say Porkmar has very little free time, and I saw a sneaky tattoo in a picture of him in his Tipperary jersey. I think his interview with him is in the
Did you get
Sunday
any of
Independent.
those Olympic ring tattoos that's become the trend now?
No, and I'd hardly admit to it if I did. But they were very trendy and remain so.
Yeah.
There's after every Olympic cycle, you can go on to the SwimSwam website or any of these websites, and the Olympians will have posted their tattoos. And the fastest man in the world at the moment has a sleeve of tattoos. Caleb Dressel is his name, but he was getting these tattoos all the way through college. So once again, perhaps booking my theory that he was just bored.
Well, it's never too late. We can get those rings done.
You're okay.
Always an Olympian.
Across the chest.
You're okay.
Big.
Okay. If you get them when you're young and then you get to my age, then the rings kind of go or get expanded.
We're pretty much done. Sinead Carroll from the Journal, thank you. Gary O'Toole, former Olympian. Well, you're never a former Olympian. Gary
Always
O'Toole,
an Olympian.
Olympian. Thank you very much for coming into the studio.
you,
We'll take a short break.
The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
In association with the Air Sport app, allowing you to cast your favourite sporting action from your tablet or mobile phone straight to your TV.
Join the conversation at newstalk.com.
Muscular pain can last all day. Introducing new Nurofen Durance. Ireland's first non-prescription 24-hour medicated pain plaster delivers ibuprofen continuously, right where it's needed, helping to keep you pain-free all day. Nurofen Durance. Up to 24-hour relief for muscle and joint pain. Nurofen Durance 200mg medicated patch is indicated for the